It is yet another day where you wake up feeling hate and disgust and frustration with your belly. And I'm gonna guess that it's not new for you, that you likely have been here for a very long time. Actually, I would venture to say that there probably isn't a time in your life when you can remember having a peaceful relationship with your belly. And now you're in a place where you're wondering, why do I hate my belly so much? And how do I create a more positive, accepting relationship with my belly? Because let's be real, walking around with shame and guilt about your body, and in particular about your belly, leads to all kinds of not so great things, right? It's really difficult to connect to hunger and fullness when we don't feel our belly or don't want to be interacting with it. It's difficult to be intimate with our partners or allow our kids to freely touch our bellies when we have a difficult relationship with our belly. It is difficult to exist in the world without having to contort ourselves and pull our shirts and wear certain clothes for fear that someone's gonna see your belly. And it is difficult to have a belly in this world because you've been told all kinds of things about what it means to have fat on your belly. And that can be both really, really scary and also sometimes just really shame-filled for you. So I want you to know that there are ways that you can improve your relationship, in particular with your belly. Usually I'm talking about things related to body image in general, but I really want to hone in on this because this tends to be the most charged area of the body for most people, and offer you some specific things to try and do to start to heal your relationship with your belly and improve your relationship with your belly. Be sure to check out the free resource that I have for you below. It is a journaling calendar. It walks you through every single month, both journaling activities and things to try and ask yourself, all related to healing your relationship with your body. I promise you won't regret it, especially if you're on this journey. So go ahead and check it out now. My name is Catherine Metzelaar. I'm a registered dietitian, certified intuitive eating counselor, and eating disorder specialist. And I help you to create peace with food and your body so that all of it takes up less headspace and you can live your life with more joy, freedom, and abundance. You definitely want to take a listen to this. The reality is you exist in a world that constantly tells you, endlessly tells you, that your belly is supposed to look a certain way. Think about it now, just for a moment. When you see bellies on media, in shows, out in various places related to the media, it could also include social media, what kind of bellies do you tend to think of? Usually they look a very particular way. Usually it's in people with thin bodies, and if they're not in thin bodies, then usually they're pregnant. And what happens is this accumulation of seeing bellies as being flat and muscular and having no fat or very little fat on them has sent the message to you that, you know what, your belly is not normal and it shouldn't have any fat on it, and you should be ashamed of your belly. And if you have a belly that doesn't look like X belly over here, then you know what? You should be working hard to get rid of it. Not to mention, literally every single weight loss ad, commercial always shows that belly picture where someone has lost weight. I know you know which one I'm talking about, where they will show their bellies in the picture before, and then they'll show kind of the pant coming out afterwards. But nonetheless, despite all the messaging that you've been told, you're in a place now where you're wondering, how do I get out of this hole that I'm in, this hole that is belly hatred, belly shame, and just constantly feeling like you can't live a full and meaningful life because you have a lot of hate of your belly. So we're gonna be talking about how you got here, and I'm gonna offer you some specific things that you can do to begin to dig yourself out of that hole of belly hatred and belly disgust, which may not mean that you're gonna love your belly. And trust me, I would love for you to love your body and love your belly, but that's a big ask. And so we need to start nice and slow. And remember that when you're doing this work, that you don't need to come out of the gate going super fast. We're not expecting 0 to 100. So much of this is about getting curious, it's about practice, it's about exposure, and understanding all those messages that are inside of us, as well as understanding that we exist in social systems that also impact our relationship with our body, some of which we'll never be able to change. So learning how to navigate those systems. But nonetheless, let's dive in. The first thing that I want to recommend to you, and you've heard me talk about this before, but I promise you it's an important one because we consume so much social media, is to really take a close look at your social media feed to get a good understanding of who you're following. And in particular, my advice is to follow people with diverse bellies, right? Because out in our world, unfortunately, despite there being more representation when it comes to body diversity, the reality is even with larger bodies or more diverse bodies, it still tends to be that same kind of shape where it's a small belly, small waist, sort of bigger hips, that hourglass shape that some people refer to. And the reality is lots of people don't have that size body. And so what happens when we don't see ourselves, in this case, when we don't see our belly often, then we start to believe that our belly doesn't exist and we should be working hard to get rid of it. So follow people that actually have a diverse size of bellies. Follow people from a variety of different industries, right? It doesn't just have to be body positive accounts, so that you can begin to see and normalize a diversity of bellies, because you don't normally get exposure to a diversity of bellies. Usually it's either people that are pregnant or people that have very thin muscular bellies and nothing in between. My second piece of advice to you is you are going to need to stop sucking it in. And I know this is hard because we often derive a lot of safety in kind of holding our stomach in and keeping it in and keeping it tight. But the reality is, here's a couple ways that it gets in the way of not only you healing your relationship to your belly, but in particular just gets in the way of you living what I would consider to be a full life. More specifically, you cannot breathe fully, which requires a relaxing of your belly muscles and in that area in order to take a full breath in. So folks who are constantly holding their belly in, even now as I do it, it's difficult for me to talk to you. I really need to loosen my belly so I can breathe fully, that they're constantly holding it in. They're not really taking full breaths, and that can impact your stress levels, that can impact how much anxiety you're feeling, it can impact how fatigued you get, and so much more. And in addition to this, if we're constantly holding our bellies in, this also impacts our relationship and feeling of hunger and fullness. If I'm holding my belly in at mealtime, that means that I might be hungry later because I haven't fully allowed myself to feel my fullness. I haven't allowed my body to eat enough. And the same goes with hunger. It can impact our connection to hunger. It can feel really confusing, and it can leave you feeling really confused. So stop sucking it in, but slowly. If you are constantly holding your stomach in, please know that this is not me telling you that you should just go, again, 0 to 100. We don't want that. We're going nice and slow here. I would recommend that you start picking one time that feels a little bit safer. Could it be when you're watching Netflix and you just allow yourself and your belly to be loose and you put a blanket over it or a pillow over it because that's what feels more comfortable? Or maybe it's at mealtime. You start with that because your belly is not seen and it's under the table. You practice that over and over again, building skill and allowing your belly to be loose and loose and loose in different occasions. And then over time, it gets easier and you'll notice the difference and feeling of holding your belly in versus allowing it to relax. And then with that information, you can decide whether or not you want to constantly hold your belly in, or are you wanting to really just let it loose. The third piece of advice for you is you are going to need to stop body checking, in particular your belly. And body checking, remember, I've done videos on this, but as a reminder, it is simply the act of checking your body, in this case your belly, to make sure that it's okay. Common body checking behaviors with the belly area in particular are feeling for bone, fat, or muscle. Lots of people do this right when they wake up. You might experience this too. It's looking in the mirror and zoning in specifically on your belly area, or when you walk past a reflection. It's checking your clothes when you try them on, and this is particular kinds of clothes to see if it still fits your belly. Body checking behaviors have an inverse relationship with you feeling better about your body. The more you body check, the worse you're gonna feel. So in this case, the more you are belly checking, the worse you're going to feel about your belly. And yes, this is a difficult one too. And this is another area that you don't need to go from where you're at to stopping completely. It's just not gonna work like that, unfortunately. But what you can do is incrementally start to resist the desire to want to belly check. So if you are, for example, waking up every morning, touching your belly, searching for muscle or bone or checking your fat, maybe you want one of those days you decide to resist and see what happens. And that's really the practice. We do that over and over again. Can we resist? When we resist, what happens? When we try to resist and we can't resist checking, then what happens? All of it is information, but over time, you build skill around checking your body, and in this case, your belly much, much, much less, with the goal of getting to a place of acceptance or okayness, or even a positive place with your belly. And the fourth thing that I want to recommend to you is you have to get extra curious about the things that you believe about your bellies and in general fat on bellies. You have been told so much, I can promise you, by this point in your life, about what it means to have fat on your belly, what is good and what is bad, what is attractive and what is not attractive, and honestly, so much more. So you have to get really curious. And a lot of times there's a lot there that we don't even know, that we're not aware of, that we carry with us. What did our parent, mom, dad, caregiver say about their bellies when we were growing up? What was the messaging that you got in your family about bellies? What have you heard out in the world? What has a doctor or a clinician told you about your belly, and how has that impacted you? It's really important to really dig there. It can help to journal about this as a way to begin to get curious, and also to understand the beliefs that exist within you. What does it mean to have fat on your belly? Is there any significance? What's the story that you tell yourself about your belly? What are the things that our culture and society say about the belly that you have? All of this is important to understand. And the fifth and last way to get to a place of acceptance with your belly is to really pay attention to what you notice out in the world. And what I mean by that is when we hold certain beliefs, our brain does this really interesting thing where it looks for proof and confirmation that what we believe is true. So if you're walking around, for example, feeling and thinking and believing that there is something wrong with your belly and no one has a belly like you and everyone has thinner bellies and flatter bellies, you know what's gonna happen when you're out in the world? Likely you are only going to see bellies that confirm that there is something wrong with your belly. So that's why all the reasons that I just said a moment ago, all the first 4 steps are gonna be important, because you first need to expose yourself to a variety of bellies. But beyond that, it's also really important to pay attention to the things that you say to yourself, because what you say to yourself will change what your brain is looking for. And of course, this isn't it. It's not as simple as just changing the things that you say to yourself about your belly and then magically, boom, everything is done. No. And this can be a helpful step, because remember, your brain wants proof of what you believe to be true. So if you believe and tell yourself often there's something wrong with your belly, then you are gonna find proof that that's true. So just pay attention to what you're noticing, what bodies you're noticing out in the world. And this can be a place to begin to shift. In summary, we have talked about the reasons why you hate your belly and why, honestly, it's not your fault that you hate your belly. If there is anything that you take from this video, I want it to be that. It is not your fault. You didn't make up these standards. You have been exposed to millions upon millions of messages at this point in your life about what your belly is supposed to look like. So I would encourage you to try those steps that I just mentioned as a way to begin to unlearn all the things that you have been taught, as well as challenge your relationship with your belly and expose yourself to a variety of bellies. It takes a combination of things to heal our relationship with our body, and in this case, heal our relationship with our belly. There are specific things that you were telling yourself about your belly. There is a story about your belly too. And so it can take time. It can take a lot of time to unravel and to unpack and to challenge all of this. And I want to encourage you to stick with it, because over time it does get better. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you liked it, I always appreciate a like below, and I will see you back here soon.